Hey everybody, this video is called The Work is Back On, and tonight we continue our pass-through study here in the book of Ezra, chapter 5, where we're going to look at the temple's construction being resumed. So, if Ezra chapter 5, verse 1 and 2 starts out, "Then the prophet Haggai and Zechariah, the son of Iddo, prophets, prophesied to the Jews who were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel who was over them. So Zerubbabel, the son of Shealtiel, and Jeshua, the son of Zozadak, rose up and began to build the house of God, which is in Jerusalem, and the prophets of God were with them, helping them." So we see the prophets Haggai and Zechariah mentioned here, and if you know your Bible, you know that Haggai and Zechariah are minor prophets in the Bible. And the book of Haggai is styled as a royal administrative correspondence sent from the sovereign king of the universe through the messenger of the Lord, Haggai. And part of its message is addressed specifically to Zerubbabel, the political leader, and Joshua, the religious leader, telling them to take courage and to go on and work on this temple, because they weren't doing it on their own. They were doing it with God with them. And that's seen back in Haggai, or over in Haggai chapter 1 verse 13 and Haggai chapter 2 verse 4. And these two prophets, they gave severe reproaches and threats if the people did not return to the building, and promised national prosperity if they did. And not long after the exiles heard this message, the temple's work began afresh after a 16-year pause. In verse 2, prophets of God are in addition to Haggai and Zechariah. There were more than just them among the prophets. And the help of the prophets extend to the civil and religious leaders of the community, and it takes form of courageous preaching and constant encouragement. And I highly recommend you to check out Haggai, the book, especially Haggai 1 verse 2 through 10, to see the heart of Haggai's prophecy as he rebukes the people for their attitude towards the building of the temple. And God called them to get to work. And I know Democrats would not approve that message, but some of the Zechariah's prophecy is also recorded in the book of Zechariah. And Zechariah means that the Lord remembers. In verse 3 through 5 says, "At the same time, Tattenai, the governor of the region beyond the river in Shathar Boznai, and their companions came to them and spoke thus to them, 'Who has commanded you to build this temple and finish this wall?' Then accordingly, we told them the names of the men who were constructing this building. But the eye of their God was upon the elders of the Jews, so that they could not make them cease till a report could go to Darius. Then a written answer was returned concerning the matter." So Tattenai most likely was a Persian official who has commanded you, in other words, who issued you a royal decree to build. In verse 5, "But the eye of their God was upon the elders," it speaks of God's hand of protection on them, which led to this endeavor, allowed the work to continue with official communication that was going on with the Persian king Darius. And throughout the books of Ezra and Nehemiah, you're going to see that God is involved through the actions of his people. And Tattenai was appointed to govern the province that included Judea. And he and his companions wanted to know why the work of building the temple and the wall had resumed. And Tattenai seems much more reasonable than the Samaritans who opposed the work some 15 years prior to this. And not all who oppose God's work does it out of premeditated evil, but some do it out of custom and a sense of duty. And the returned Jews weren't trying to rebel against the authority of the Persian king. And verse 6 here says, "This is a copy of the letter that Tattenai sent. The governor of the region beyond the river of Shethar Boznai and his companions, the Persians who were in the region beyond the river, to Darius the king. So, verse 6 here, as a good administrator, Tatene not only sent a letter to Darius, but he also preserved as copy that made its own way into Ezra's record. In verse 7 through 17 says, they sent a letter to him which was written thus, to Darius the king, all peace. Let it be known to the king that we went into the province of Judea to the temple of the great God, which is being built with heavy stones, and timber is being laid in the walls, and this work goes on diligently and prospers in their hands. Then we asked those elders and spoke thus to them, who commanded you to build this temple and to finish these walls? We also asked them their names to inform you, that we might write the names of the men who were chief among them. And thus they returned an answer, saying, we are the servants of God of heaven and earth, we are rebuilding the temple that was built many years ago, which a great king of Israel built and completed. But because our fathers provoked God of heaven to wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed the temple and carried the people away to Babylon. However, in the first year of Cyrus, king of Babylon, King Cyrus issued a decree to build this house of God. Also, gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple that was in Jerusalem, and carried it into the temple of Babylon. Those King Cyrus took from the temple of Babylon, and they were given one name, Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor. And he said to him, take these articles, go carry them to the temple site that's in Jerusalem, and let the house of God be rebuilt on its former site. Then the same Sheshbazzar came and laid the foundation of the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. But from that time, even until now, it's been under construction, and it is not finished. Now therefore, if it seems good to the king, let a search be made in the king's treasures house, which is there in Babylon, whether it is so that a decree was issued by King Cyrus to build this house of God at Jerusalem, and let the king send us his pleasure concerning this matter. So, in these verses that were lengthy here, verse 7 through 17, as the chapter comes to a close, in this letter, the governor Tatene seems to fairly recount the situation from his perspective. And without prejudice or malice, he explains the matter to King Darius. In verse 8, technique of using beams and stones blocks was a well-known form of wall construction at this time. And the reason for mentioning in verse 8 was it seemed to be a preparation for conflict or battle. And including this piece of information served as a threat to the Persian official who wanted no such conflict. And it prospered in verse 8 in their hands due to the care of God and due to the preaching of the prophets. And verse 14 through 16 says that verse 14 through 16, some will argue that it contradicts chapter 3, verses 8 through 10, that Zerubbabel, Jeshua, and the Jewish workmen laid the foundation, but it actually wasn't. It actually doesn't, because Sheshbazzar was the political appointee of the Persian king over the Jews, and therefore is given the official credit for the work that's actually done by them. In verse 13, I challenge you to check out back in chapter 1 a few weeks last week, chapter 1 verses 2 through 4, to see further about verse 13. And so we're going to keep this video short because we have plenty of long ones throughout the study through Ezra. So to wrap up here, we see that the construction resumes, not just through man's efforts, but God helps by sending prophets to get the work started again. And we see that God helps in verses 3 through 5 by protecting the work and allowing it to continue. In verse 6 through 17, it shows us the letter to King Darius with their message. And we'll see in next is we're going to look at the second temple completed. And congratulations, nice short book here. We are already halfway through our study in the book of Ezra. We only have another couple weeks. And we'll be looking next at the completion of the second temple tomorrow. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. Have a great weekend. But I hope that you catch tomorrow's video. God bless.